I often think that one of the great qualities that's necessary for every human being, besides a generous and attentive heart and mind, is a sense of self-compassion for the way that you're made in particular. That you wouldn't lose faith, no matter what, in your own difficulties and awkwardnesses, and that some of your own awkward ways of being in the world are actually necessary to your final confrontation with existence, and that you couldn't get there without somehow being bereft in certain ways by having certain failings, and that those failings are actually a core part of our experience of the numinous. I do think that we diminish ourselves with many of the images that we hold for success in life, so that we feel as if in order to get to any kind of extraordinary experience in life, we have to cross the finishing line like some Olympic athlete. But I do believe that there are many experiences in life, many extraordinary edges that you can only actually crawl into on your hands and knees. That part of the experience of the final meeting would be missing if you did not actually follow the whole vulnerable contour of your own imperfect belonging into the fullness of the experience. There's a beautiful poem by Rainer Maria Rilke who describes this wonderfully, using the image of a swan entering the water. And I don't know if you've ever seen a swan when it's out of the water, but it certainly doesn't carry any of the grace that we love in the swan when it's actually bathing in its own immaculate white reflection. If you see a swan out of water, it actually looks as if it doesn't quite belong to the world, and it takes a step and the whole weight of the creature sways to one side, and it looks forever as if it's going to fall over and hit the ground, and it just catches itself and then swings back through the whole pendulum of its awkwardness and back to the other side of itself, and it really looks as if it's about to trip over its own feet. But the moment of transformation occurs when the swan touches the water. And here's Rilke's description of that Noumenous Edge, that moment when the transformation occurs. But he doesn't ignore the awkwardness. It's part of the swan's being. And he says, "This clumsy living that moves lumbering as if in rope through what is not done, reminds us of the awkward way the swan walks, and to die, which is a letting go of the ground we stand on and cling to every day, is like the swan when he nervously lets himself down into the water which receives him gaily, and which flows under and after him wave after wave, while the swan, unmoving and marvellously calm, is pleased to be carried, each moment more fully grown, more like a king, farther and farther on. This clumsy living that moves lumbering as if in rope through what is not done." It's a really incisive, encapsulating image of someone caught up in the web of their days, where everything seems to besiege them, everything seems to hold them in place. And I remember working for many years with this poem around the whole necessity of dying in order to live. It's an old cliche, but nonetheless true, that you have to let go of your old self quite often in order to have room to pick up anything new at all. But one evening I was reading this poem to quite a large audience, and it was just as if I let myself down into the waters of the poem, in the same way that the swan lets itself down into the waters of the river. This clumsy living that moves lumbering as if in rope through what is not done reminds us of the awkward way the swan walks, and to die, which is a letting go of the ground we stand on and cling to every day, is like the swan when he nervously lets himself down into the water. I realized it was much simpler even than dying and living. All the swan does in order to effect its transformation from awkwardness to grace and belonging is move toward the element where it belongs. That's all it does. And I thought it was an astonishing key, an extraordinary key to transformation. All you have to know in your life are the things that you love, the things you hold in your affection. You only have to know the frontiers where simply by being at that frontier you come alive. And when you think about it, you can go through your whole life taking an inventory of the elements of your life. What is the work that brings you alive? What are the places that bring you alive? What are the conversations that vitalize you? In whose presence, simply by being in their presence, do you find yourself making the best of yourself? Do you find yourself coming to the fore? Will you have faith in those frontiers, in those extraordinary places which affect extraordinary transformations? And will you arrange your life so you can spend more time at those frontiers? Diese Mühsal durch noch ungetane schwer und wie gebunden hinzugern, gleich dem ungeschaffenen Gang des Schwannes. You can feel the self-compassion just soaking through the line in German. Gleich dem ungeschaffenen Gang des Schwannes is like the uncreated walk of the swan, is the literal original German. As if part of us, before we've actually put ourselves into conversation with the true elements of our life, is still not fully formed, is still uncreated, in Rilke's words.